Well, it's now time to bring you a focus on the show today. Now, preparatory to the post-COVID-19 resumption of Nigeria's tourism sector, the Standard Organization of Nigeria says it will deploy a well-developed standard that will help prevent the spread of COVID-19 in the sector. This development was made known during a meeting earlier with the National Mirror Committee on Tourism, a stakeholders committee set up by the Standards Organization of Nigeria, aimed at finding a globally acceptable health and safety standard ground to revive the sector from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The draft standards of health and safety measures for tourism and hospitality establishment post-COVID-19 resumption, which stakeholders are currently fine-tuning the process with SON's guidance, would also help the sector to rebound in full force when the lockdown is completely eased for the sector to commence operations. The United Nations Tourism Organization estimates a loss of $850 million to about $1.1 billion in terms of international tourist arrivals and $910 million to $1.1 trillion in export revenues and 100 to about 120 million jobs, depending on whether the borders are opened, as at the last expectation, July or September or even December this year. Tourism receipts amounted to $1.480 billion, an increase by 4.4% higher than the global GDP growth as in the previous 8 years. Passenger transport is also affected and is now worth another $250 billion. Tourism exports account for 7% of the global trade in goods and services, or about $1.7 trillion. Now, in 2019, the most popular destinations were France, Spain, and the United States and China. Well, I have with me now in our Lagos studio, Omotayo Omotosho, the former Director General of the Nigerian Tourism Development Corporation. Good to have you on the Breakfast Show today.
Thank you.
Now, let's start off with guidelines to resumptions, waivers and interventions that you expect to kickstart the tourism sector. It's been quite a lull, and we've had so much of losses in terms of job cuts, inputs, finances, and a whole lot more. In terms of strategically now positioning the sector back on track, what should be the guidelines and our focus?
Thank you very much. The guidelines are not totally different from the guidelines of preventing COVID-19 spread as constituted by the Presidential Task Force in Abuja. Basically, we must ensure the basic standards. We must wear face masks. A lot of people are not complying to this. We must also ensure we wash our hands regularly. The hospitality institutions must ensure that before you get into the, the arena, from the main entrance, you go to Sheraton Hotels, you go to Nikon Luxury, you go to Transcorp, they will have to frisk you. You want to, they want to check your temperature. And then, of course, they will give you the sanitizer, you wash your hands, you sanitize, and you go in. You make sure you maintain social distancing, 2 meters. We must comply with the existing safety rules. But beyond that, what I see is a boom for domestic tourism. It's a boom. Yes, we've undergone a lot of losses. International tourists are not going anywhere. People are staying put within their own enclaves. You won't see tourists coming from Europe or from America to Africa. A lot of them would rather stay back. But go check out what's going on in Canada today. Go check out what's going on in Mexico. Go check out what is going on in the Caribbean islands. All these places, their locals are developing their domestic tourism. They are going to all the various tourist sites and attractions within their nations. That is what we should be getting ready to do. And we cannot do it as private sector operators without our government. The state governors must hit the ground running. They must partner together with the private sector to develop domestic tourism. It must be a boom. And this is the opportunity. We cannot allow it to slip us by.
And now, talking about this boom now, let's look at tourism infrastructure. At the end of the day, the outlook we have domestically it's pretty much poor, and to a very large extent does not attract enough of investment, does not attract the sort of attention we ought to have. And we have so many beautiful tourist centers and a whole lot to explore, but just the infrastructure dampens the sentiment to a very large extent. Now, how does this affect our local outlook and also looking at the global outlook as well, and what should be the investment plan this time around? You've talked about state governors taking the bull by the horn, partnering with the private sector.
Thank you. Talking of tourism infrastructure, this brings to my mind the interview I had with Mr. President over 25 years ago when he was chairman Petroleum Trust Fund. He talked extensively about the need to fund tourism infrastructure. I was going through my archives and I saw the picture just yesterday, and I said, I must bring this to the studio. And I asked him, why tourism infrastructure? He told us that tourism cannot thrive without the basic infrastructure. We remember him as chairman of the PTF, Petroleum Trust Fund, and I asked him, I invited him to NTA, on Tours of Greater Nigeria, and I asked him, what is his agenda on this? He went a great deal to tell us that PTF is to fund construction of roads and reconstruction, is to fund medical facilities and amenities and institutions. It's also to pour funds at the education sector. So at that time, he was promoting educational tourism, health tourism, and infrastructure tourism. A lot of people would not be thinking of traveling outside Nigeria, but within Nigeria for medical attention. And so there wasn't so much of medical tourism outside Nigeria, which you call outbound. It was inbound. We want such times to come back. I'm seizing this opportunity to appeal to Mr. President to remind him. I have this picture of all he did at PTF, beautiful work, and all the infrastructure in Nigeria were working at that time. We need our infrastructure to get back. Without infrastructure, we won't be able to do much. Just a few days ago, I learned of a lady, Chidinma and Chima, that lost their lives around Ilasamaja due to poor infrastructure. Bad roads. We learned that the truck that's carrying a container fell off and compressed the vehicle that they were in, the public transport. And we lost this young soul, staff of FAN, 27 years old, and Chima, 29.
Okay, if I may button now, wrapping up the conversation, in terms of attending to the job losses, we've seen on the global front bailout intervention for key sectors, but we don't necessarily have a strong focus, if I may say, for the tourism sector. Yes, we have for health, we have for aviation, manufacturing, and a whole lot more, but tourism still takes the back seat. Do you think this is a reflection of how much of a political will, both on our part as government and the government, that we're taking tourism?
Well, I would say that it's not that. It's more of a fact that there is no continuity. There is no continuity. When you're talking of private sector and the public sector working together to promote tourism, this reminds me of what we did way back year 2000, 20 years ago, 18 years ago, and we need to learn from it. At that time, we saw a reason to draw the private sector operators to ourselves and work together in synergy. Government agencies cannot be doing their own and then operators in the sector doing theirs. No, government will call them together. The creative industry is a subsector of the tourism industry. The focus should be on tourism. I remember the time we had Miss World. God gave us this beautiful African to win the most prestigious beauty pageant, and we went to town with it. I saw a reason to take Miss World to all our tourist centers in Nigeria, preparing her for the press conference. And so we went to La Campagne Tropicana. It was such a beautiful sight to behold. We had a lot of visitors coming from outside Nigeria just to take the autograph of Miss World. We work together with the private sector operator, the owner of La Campagne. There are a lot of other private sector operators like that. We must work together. There must be synergy.
There must be synergy. Thank you very much for your time on the Breakfast Show today, Omotayo Omotosho.
Thank you.